Welcome to Vampire Divorce with attorney Clarke Young.
Welcome back to Vampire Divorce with attorney Clarke Young. Clarke is a seasoned family law consultant and expert witness who helps courts and families navigate the realities of high conflict custody cases. I'm Lisa Mosby, and today we're talking about false allegations, not as isolated accusations, but as control system in borderline custody cases. Clarke, in a borderline custody case, accusations tend to surface repeatedly. What distinguishes these allegations from ordinary disputes or misunderstandings?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Um, when people are talking about normal sorts of communications or disputes or conflicts, again, we talked about this before, but you're really talking about the assumption hidden in that is that you're talking about two normal range human beings that are psychologically able, to actually get along and are rational. But that's not really happening in the borderline cases. When you have cases like this, you're going to have um, all these accusations that are going to be happening. So typically what you'll see is at the very beginning of a case, when the normal range spouse finally throws in the towel and makes the big mistake of telling the borderline that their marriage is over and they want a divorce, that triggers the borderline's fear of abandonment, and they shift into their vampiric borderline mode. And from that point forward, the whole family dynamic goes from very, very bad to even worse. And the normal range spouse who wants a divorce is going to be punished for wanting to abandon the borderline. So the borderline's game at that point becomes the game of subjugation. And there's going to be this, on one hand, pushing away. And on the other hand, there's going to be this trying to tie and subjugate the normal range parent to the borderline so that the normal range parent can't escape. So there's this weird dynamic going on where they're doing everything they can to destroy. At the same time, they're trying to keep the normal range parent close enough that they can destroy them. But it's not a healthy relationship or a connection at all. It's a very negative attachment pattern. And it's a very traumatic attachment pattern for the normal range spouse and for everybody in the family, including extended family members. So you're going to see, to answer your question more directly, right from the get-go, you're going to see that the false allegations are being made. So what does that look like? Well, it's usually in California, false domestic violence allegations that are filed under the Domestic Violence Prevention Act. And because of the way that the new and improved domestic violence restraining, I should be called that, that was a Freudian slip. It's not called the Domestic Violence Restraining Order Act, which is what it should be called. What it's called is the Domestic Violence Prevention Act. Well, it doesn't prevent domestic violence, and it's not intended or designed to do that. So you'll get the borderline racing into court, making completely fictitious false allegations of all kinds against the other parent, most of those allegations will be allegations of actions and behaviors that are what the borderline did, not what the normal range parent did. But you'll have a projection confession happening. That's when the vampire borderline will project onto the other parent the very behaviors they're confessing in their moving papers. Of course, the judges don't know that. So you get this list of horrendous things that have happened that the other parent, the normal range parent, has allegedly done to the child, but in reality, it's just a confession that the borderline is making about the things that they've done to the children. And it'll take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, for all of those false allegations to be proven to be false. Because again, the court system is not set up to treat these cases with the respect they deserve and need. And so the children are now in a horrible hailstrom of 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 just dysfunctional behavior, because now the borderline parent is trying to prevent the normal range parents from having any access at all to the children. And so these narratives, these false narratives are being built. Everyone's scrambling and spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get other people to come in to testify. Some of them are laymen, some of them are professionals, some of them are family members, some of them are witnesses, some of them are school teachers, whatever. But they are people that know the family, know the dynamics somewhat. And so this takes weeks and months to try and sort through. And that's where that false narrative at the very beginning of the case gets launched. And then you're playing, if you're the normal range parent, you're playing defense from day one, which is why it's so powerful to go in with those false allegations right away, because you pick up every marble on the table on day one, and it costs nothing to lie.
And what I'm hearing you say, Clark, is that making these false allegations a one-time legal event instead of part of an ongoing pattern kind of gets lost in the process. So, how do these false allegations how do they function as a tool for control rather than an attempt to resolve a specific issue?
Right. I mean, your question almost answers itself. The whole purpose behind what the borderline's doing is to subjugate and control. So they expect, at a psychological level, the borderlines expect the entire universe to revolve around their current needs, to have their whatever their needs or desires or goals or objectives are. So if your objective is to subjugate, you can just make up anything and go in, and with a very straight face, just because you believe it. I mean, if you could do a brain probe, you could see that they're actually believing what they're saying about the other person, even though they're talking about themselves. So that level of projection and self delusion is profound. And people who haven't been in a relationship with a borderline don't really realize these people exist. I mean, that's why the vampire analogy is so strong. They're always working behind the scenes, in the dark, in the shadows. They're always shape shifting. They can become anything they need to be to get what they want, but they present themselves as very normal people. And they're very convincing at that, including in court. So they sit there and they just have written this narrative, and everyone responds as though there must be some truth to this, right? I mean, nobody would actually walk into court and just make all this up. Well, no, that's not true. Borderlines, that's their everyday existence. Everything they do is a complete fiction. It's a complete lie. So that's why I talk about the level of deceit. I mean, everything that a borderline does is at one level or another deceitful. It's deceitful at the behavioral level. It's deceitful at the psychological, emotional level. It's deceitful socially. Everything is a deceit. So that's what the game's all about.
And then what role does fear play in keeping these accusations effective? Fear of losing custody, or fear of appearing uncooperative, or fear of reputational damage?
Well, uh, we're talking about two different parties. Fear for the normal range person is the reality that they're living in, because all their situational stressors and external influences and the environment is a very dangerous place. Borderlines are some of the most dangerous people on the whole pathological spectrum. They're very, very dangerous. Well, but so you look at the other side, and from the borderline's point of view, fear is a wonderful weapon. It's right up there. Well, the control, the manipulation, the power playing, subjugation, that's all happening visibly at the behavioral level. But at the psychological level, they're employing fear is one of their primary emotional tools, weapons. And fear, and also it's going to be a lot of, they're very greedy. They have insatiable appetites. And there's also a lot of what the Buddhists would call habitualized anger, which is hate. So there's a lot of animus happening, and it's very evil. I mean, we've talked about this in other episodes, but it's just pure evil. It's evil without a conscience. There's no definition of right or wrong to a borderline other than right and good is what I need and want in the moment. That's how they define it. So they want the children because they need to feed off of the children emotionally, psychologically, because they're little wells of joy and hope and all that. And that's why they need the children. That's why they have children. So the pathogenic aspect of borderlines is just like, it's like once you see it, you can't not see it. It's like it's there. And so when you're again, you're talking about fear, coming back to your question, fear is well, as they said in the Dune series, fear is the mind killer. It's the soul killer. And they're going to use fear against the normal range parent. That's the weapon. And for the normal range parent, they're going to live in a constant state of fear and anxiety that is very dangerous. So that's why in spouses of borderlines, they develop PTSD, anxiety disorders, and depression.
You know, the thing that comes to mind is being on the receiving end of that. How does the parent's credibility, their emotional stability, and their ability to parent break down based on your experience? What do you see happen to these folks who are on the receiving end of this? How do they continue to keep going?
Yeah. Well, now you find out who life's real heroes are. Because on the one side, you want to go into court and throttle the judge and shake the judge and say, would you just please wake up? Can't you see what's happening to my children? Can't you see what's going on here? But the moment you become emotional, you lose because stereotypes come into play. And any father, for example, who goes in and says, I'm the victim, you will never, ever, ever get 1 day of custody time with your children, because somewhere deep in our human psyches, men aren't allowed to be victims. Even though objectively speaking, you're a victim. I mean, take Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? Objectively looking, he was shot. He was assassinated. He was harassed. His whole life, he was treated as a victim. He was pursued. But he never put on the mantle of victimhood, which is why he's now a national hero, because he refused to say, I'm a victim. And that's who you have to be. You have to be a saint if you're going to be in family court. So even though you feel great despair, even though you've walked into hell and you're fighting demons that are surrounding you and biting you and eating you alive, when you go into court, you have to sit there and you have to be totally calm and rational, and you have to just present to the court as somebody who can handle an infinite amount of abuse and torture and torment for an infinite amount of time. And that's how you have to present. That's how you have to present yourself to the court.
How do structured enforceable custody orders limit the usefulness of false allegations as a control mechanism? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot packed into that question, because the truth is that you have now walked into hell and back again. In the Lord of the Rings situation, you've been there, been there and back. You've done it, and you've gone through all of those journeys that Joseph Campbell talked about in the hero's journey, and it's all Greek mythology, really. I mean, you've done that. You've done that. So now you're at the point where you've gotten this custody order, where you are given the authority to actually have control over your life and your children's lives, and you've opened up the possibility, only the possibility, that your children might actually grow up to be normal range parents capable of normal range relationships. Probably not, because they were probably destroyed between age 1 and 4 by the borderline, because that's when their minds and their personalities and their characters and their view of life and the way they hold their own self-images are being developed. And those things uh, are, I don't know, tormented and twisted between birth and age 4 or 5. So you're working on the margins if you don't get control early on. But let's assume that by some miracle you were able to go in and get a judge who really understands what's going on, and you got your children at age 2 or 3. So now your children have a chance. Well, that's when those custody orders we talked about before come into play, where the false narrative has been exposed. You've taken the mask off the borderline. Like any vampire movie, when you take off the mask or you expose the borderline to light, they just crumble into dust. Or you drive a stake through the heart, which never ever happens in real life. I mean, that's really the one part of the vampire myth that never happens. That's basically when the court issues the order that says, normal range parent, I'm giving you the right and authority to just rule your family and do what you can with this problem, because this system was never intended or designed to deal with borderlines. And that's really what they're saying when you get that order. They're basically saying, I don't want to see you again, borderline, get out of here. I don't want to see your face ever again. Normal range parent, take care of your family. Good luck. Goodbye. And that's kind of how that's the happiest ending you can put on this Grimm's fairy tale.
For parents currently facing accusations, what important information or understanding about patients' long-term positioning and case resolution do you want them to know? That's where I want to wrap up today.
Yeah. And that's really the intake interview when you have a client come on board, because they have to know certain things. They have to know that this is not going to get resolved easily. They have to know that they have to be a saint. They have to understand how to deal with the borderline in court versus out of court, which is very different. They have to know that they have to stoop to conquer, and they have to be able to endure a lot of torture. And the biggest item, frankly, is the cost, because it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the team put together to come in to tell the court that, Your Honor, you have no choice. You have to enter this kind of an order. Even though in California and many states, the statute has a presumption that 50-50 custody is in the best interest of the child. And you know what? In normal range divorces, where both are normal range parents, that's a great idea. But when it comes to borderlines, it's the kiss of death. So you have to rebut social stereotypes, and you have to rebut statutory presumptions. You have to come up with evidence. So you have a long, long road to hoe. And as I say, it's like venturing, it's like Frodo, venturing in to Mordor and dropping the Ring of Power into the volcano where it melts. I mean, that's really what you're doing when you're dealing with a borderline case.
Thank you so much for your insights today. You've really given the audience a lot to think about, as well as given me a lot to think about and understanding. So, folks, that's it for today's episode of Vampire Divorce. To learn more about Clarke Young's work in high conflict custody cases, including consulting and expert witness services, visit clarkeyoung.com. And thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.